like to call this show cause hearing of the Tewksbury Board of Health to order. We have one two-part agenda item tonight. It was a show cause hearing for Olivera Farm, 199 Marston Street. And the two topics on the agenda tonight were: one, compliance with removal of unpermitted animals, and two, provide a detailed management plan for the operations at the Olivera Farm, including but not limited to the keeping of animals and the operation of the custom slaughterhouse. So I think Director Sullivan, I'll turn it over to you if you want to get us started.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I sent an order letter on August 23rd that was hand-delivered by a Tewksbury police officer to Olivera Farm that was signed by a representative of the farm. That order was to remove ducks within 24 hours and that a show cause hearing would be held tonight at the town hall to discuss the removal of the ducks, if it was complied with, and if there was a management plan for the farm moving forward. Today at 12:55, I spoke with Tina, who's Dennis Olivera's sister, who told me that the ducks were still on the property, but they were contained. The animal control officers also went down to the property, and I spoke with them around 1:30, and they stated that the ducks were still at the property as well.
I think you were also investigating whether or not there were any other unpermitted animals on the property. Did you make a determination?
So I checked with animal control, and they did not see any other unpermitted animals at the time.
And just a point of clarification too, because it was in the letter, our concern was that the ducks are not just not permitted, but they were also roaming around, including going into the slaughterhouse, which then contaminates the slaughterhouse, which is supposed to be a sterile environment for the slaughtering.
Just for the record, wanted to indicate that the respondent hasn't appeared for the hearing this evening. It is past the allotted time for the commencement of the hearing, so we'd like to enter into the record that there's no one here on behalf of Olivera Farm at this time. So,
And to further that, I did start the meeting about 5 minutes late to give them a chance to show up.
Mr. Chairman, could I just add to the record, just to follow up with what Mr. Scarano said, just for the purpose of the record of this
Sure.
evening, that based on the conversation between Shannon Sullivan and representatives of the farm, they did receive notice of this meeting and the order to have the ducks removed. So just for the purpose of the record, they did respond that they had received that letter.
so as a formality, I'm just gonna move, and I'm gonna make this a motion, that we enter the record, into the record, the letter that you drafted, number one, and number two, the actual certificate of service that it was delivered in hand. And if someone, I'll leave that to the chairman to follow up on that motion.
Can I just make a correction, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
When you were speaking about the ducks running freely into the slaughter area, it's actually the slaughter barn, not where the animals go inside to be processed.
Okay.
So, so they would be commingling on the property where healthy owned animals, pets not for slaughter, were being kept.
Okay, but it is a concern for contamination of the animals to be
Yes,
slaughtered. Okay.
100%.
So you want me to read these?
Yep.
Okay.
Again, I made a motion to enter into the record the actual correspondence to the permit holder. And number two, the actual service from the Tewksbury PD to the farm, so that both of those items are officially in the record.
Okay.
And I think Shannon has a copy of both, and I have a copy of the Did they sign, they also signed for it, correct?
Yes.
And I moved the third item in is their signature and acknowledgement of receipt of the letter.
You need
So
a second, Bob?
we would need a second and go
I'll
to the
second that.
chair.
Yeah, so motion, seconded,
Second?
okay. All those in favor of the stated motion signify by stating aye.
All right.
Chair votes aye as well, motion carries 4-0. So let me read the letter that was sent or delivered by police officer to the property on Monday, August 23rd. Dear Mr. Olivera, the Tewksbury Health Department was made aware that there are animals currently on the farm that are not covered under your keeping of animals permit issued by the Tewksbury Board of Health. It was reported that there are 12+ ducks on the property. These ducks are not permitted, not being kept properly, and are roaming around going in and out of the slaughterhouse. This is an immediate threat to public health due to the cross-contamination being brought in and out of the slaughterhouse. As an agent of the Tewksbury Board of Health, and in accordance with Section 8.3 of the minimum standards for the keeping of animals, I am hereby ordering you to remove all non-permitted animals, including but not limited to the ducks, within 24 hours. You are requested to attend a show cause hearing before the Tewksbury Board of Health on Thursday, August 26, 2021 at 6:00 p.m. at Tewksbury Town Hall to prove that you have complied with this order. At this meeting, we are also requesting a detailed management plan for the operation at the Olivera Farm, including but not limited to the keeping of animals and the operation of the custom slaughterhouse. Sincerely, Shannon Sullivan, Director of Public Health.
Just a point of observation, the ACO made the distinction between the slaughterhouse and the slaughter barn. At this point, I think the contamination was close enough to both that it posed a public health threat. So I'd just like to point out that even though it says slaughterhouse, it's been distinguished as the barn.
That is correct.
Okay. And then we have a document or a spieler that had been included with the letter, so the police officer was able to get name and signature that testifies that the letter was actually received on August 23rd. And we have a Maria Silva, who is the person who signed as receiving the order.
Does anyone personally know Maria Silva?
I believe she is one of Mr. Olivera's caretakers.
Okay.
But that's as far as.
So just for the record, Mr. Olivera was there and his caretaker was there. The caretaker appears to have signed for service.
I was not there for
Yeah.
that day, but it appears that,
Okay.
yes.
From that standpoint, the board could make some findings of fact, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, go ahead.
And unless anyone needs to add anything before we move forward.
I have a question. Of the animals that are being kept there, are they being kept there humanely? Are they at all, do they show any signs of abuse or anything, or are they, I know they're limited in help there, and there's some confusion as to who's on first and what's on second at the farm itself. I don't know who's allowed on the property. I heard there's restraining orders. Are the animals being kept humanely on the property?
We're having some issues with proper sustenance of food, water, and unsanitary conditions with Animal Rescue League has an open, active case right now.
I've got a major problem with that. I've worked with Mr. Oliveri for the better part of 50 years. I worked at the Tewksbury Hospital Farm with Mr. Oliveri 48 years ago. And there's a difference to me to a person and or persons that are brought up in the farming culture that know better. And he certainly knows better, and his kids do. They grew up on that farm. I got a real problem with animals being abused. I have a real problem with that. And I just wanted to make that clear to the board, and whoever else is concerned.
And one other part to note to that, when you went there today to observe whether the ducks have been removed or not, did you run into anyone there that was a staff member?
There was no answer. There's a gentleman named Edward, excuse me, Donahue, that is one of the caretakers for the animals in the slaughter barn. I knocked on the door where he normally stays. Another staff member had said that he was not there. So I wasn't able to speak with him. And there was nobody else on the property other than that man that I saw.
And you don't know if he was, excuse me,
No, go ahead.
you don't know if he was a member of the
This man was a member of the staff,
staff, okay?
yes, but not one that I've seen often.
And what was the temperature when you arrived at the, it was very hot today, I know, because I was in it myself.
Yes,
Very
around
hot.
89 degrees at least today.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I don't know, I think Mr. Rue raised a valid point, and I think what he's asking is, what's the jurisdiction that's related to that type of non-performance on the farm? But I think the ACO has jurisdiction over whether or not they can act on that unilaterally through any of the jurisdiction that they have. So this is not the end of the road for that discussion. Just so that you understand that as it relates to the, we're here for the ducks, but your question relates to the jurisdiction.
Well, my understanding and my confusion on the matter has been, where does the town of Tewksbury start and where does the Commonwealth of Massachusetts end? It sounds like the Commonwealth isn't around or hasn't been there, or they might have been there, or they were there once and they called you twice. And I just think there's a lot of room in there for animals to be neglected, and I fear that that's the case. And I don't know what to do about it other than we hold the license to permit these folks to have animals on the property. And I just want to be clear that somebody's got to be keeping tabs on whether or not they're being treated correctly before they're slaughtered. I mean, everybody eats meat.
Right,
That's not the point. The point is that before they are slaughtered, they're to be treated humanely. And
right.
Okay.
And, you know, we are finding that, you know, there is the regulation of any slaughter animal that comes in has a certain amount of time, with the state at 72 hours to go through the slaughter chain, and we're finding that animals are sitting longer than they're supposed to, and these animals are not health certificate certified, because that's not what they do with animals that are gonna be slaughtered. And that's why they have the 72-hour time frame to put those animals through the process. So we have animals that have, you know, no vetting or anything like that, sitting there with, you know, some conditions that are just getting worse with not going through the proper slaughter channel.
So this lies one of our challenges, because our area of influence is anything that impacts public health. So unfortunately, it's not within our powers for animal health. However, if poor animal health results in an actual or possible public health issue, then that becomes us. So we're trying to attack it from the handle the part that we can, but we also have the animal control officers that are both our agents and are also able to do the other part that we're not able to.
If I may add to that before, Charlie, I think I can answer your question, because at this point, we have many different jurisdictions that have some input over the operation of the farm. We're dealing with the input tonight on unpermitted animals.
Yep.
But we talked, I think, recently about what jurisdictions are in control of what operations at the farm. And we know that DPH is in control of the slaughterhouse. So after our actions this evening, everything will be transmitted to DPH about the problems at the slaughterhouse, about the problems with no operation manual. So I believe Mr. Moore Mr. Moore is going to be notified of our actions this evening. He's going to get a copy of the actions that we're taking. He's going to get a request that he enforce the provisions that relate to the slaughterhouse, and that he take action immediately on these threats that we really have no jurisdiction over, but have great concern over.
My thoughts on that is that when you pull somebody over for speeding on the highway, you pull them over and they have 5 ounces of fentanyl on them or something, there's another issue here. So we're looking at one thing and we're seeing other things that maybe we should be considering. We permit those animals on that property. If we have a problem with how those animals are being cared for on that property, we have a responsibility to act on it. I don't know. That's my point.
I believe you're 100% right. We have the ability to deal with the permit, but we really don't have the ability to deal with the operation of the slaughterhouse. So we're going to send along to Mr. Moore the fact that there is a problem, that it needs to be addressed, and it can only be addressed by DPH. It can't be addressed by us. But you are absolutely right on that jurisdiction, Mr. Chairman, on the keeping of animals. And if we find or have reason to find necessary another probable cause hearing regarding this permit, we could schedule it and invite this applicant back again to appear and address it. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
When was the last time Pam was out there? I know she's been not going out there because it was a tough place for her to be, and we've kind of like put the onus on the state to do what they're doing. It doesn't sound like they're out there enough.
I think the problem is that, you have your owned kind of, I wanna say pets, the horses that are there, which are kept under an animal keeping permit as well, a barn permit. And then you have your slaughter animals that are also being kept under there by permit. So my recommendation would be, we're going in there for little things to either check up on something or asked by the state or Board of Health to go confirm an issue or not an issue. And when we've gone there, there's always been multiple things that have had nothing to do with why we're going in the first place.
Right, there's
That
everything, yeah.
it raised a huge red flag. It's a wonder if there can be a hold on adding any new animals to the property until something gets figured out. And then the slaughter animals that are there, that have been there longer than the hours that they're supposed to be for, immediately get removed, which I do believe Dennis's sister is trying to work on. But I do think that there should be something in writing, because, we can't be there every day. Today I just happened to be asked to go there, and, we're in a heat wave, and we had a mini horse, a pony, and 2 large goats in a paddock area that had, like, this amount of water that would cover my hand, and absolutely no hay. We do have some animals down there with the concern that they have some open wound areas where the flies are getting at, that I have brought attention to someone, one of the owners there today.
I'm in the right place. What do I say?
This is Vil Maria Maldonado.
What's up, Rachel? All you guys know.
Hey. Well, my point is that there's been issues at the farm before regarding the same thing. And we keep on saying the same thing. We're gonna look into it, we're gonna talk to them, we're gonna get some action from them. They're gonna come to a meeting, they're not gonna come to a meeting. We're gonna talk to them. It keeps going back and forth between the state issues this, we do that. My concern is strictly on the permit to keep animals, and that they be treated humanely until they be treated humanely.
Right, even
With
if
the-
they're in the
Right.
slaughter barn area, to enter the slaughter chain, they still need to be given proper sustenance and proper,
Right.
sanitary provision, so, yes.
I heard.
So any of you at this table, are you representing the Olivera family tonight in the matter before us?
She is one.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Vil Maria Maldonado Flair. We're advocates for density. I've been working with the Oliver Farm for quite some time, since October 2020. This is Miss Eileen Olivera, one of the children of the Olivera farm. And we do apologize for the late, because kids have lost students. Now,
Do they need a microphone?
they have had some
They need a
issues.
microphone.
They have been.
Yeah,
Can we give them this one?
He set that one up right there for
Yeah.
anyone who was.
I can't breathe. Is it on? Here it is.
Yep.
Alright, so this is the agenda. Alright, I'm just gonna place it like that.
so you are?
I just said who I was. Oh, they couldn't hear me.
We're gonna give you a sign-in sheet, so we're just gonna prepare a sign-in sheet,
Okay,
and we're gonna send it over so that both of you folks, there it is.
so it is,
So if you could just, if you could sign into the sign-in sheet, make sure you leave a phone number there as well.
And we'll also need you to pick up the mic and record, for the record, your name and address.
So I just want to also, Mr. Chairman, I know tonight we're here for the ducks in the operation of Olivera Farm. And Eileen is a family member up there, but Miss Maldonado is not in any operation of the farm there. Just so when decisions are being made, or that it should go through at least Eileen.
I'm not here to make any decisions, I'm just here to support her.
Okay.
And due to, like I said, I'm the family advocate and I'm trying to help them to guide them to the right direction. And by Kevin that was hired, I was asked to be more hands-on. So Kevin does work for your town, correct?
I'm sorry, if you're asking questions.
I'm not asking
Well,
any
let's
questions.
just see if we can't get the protocol of the meeting. First of all, you're not a representative of the Olivera Farm that we can recognize at this meeting to bind them. So it would seem, and maybe I'm mistaken, it would seem that Miss Olivera is here, okay? And that, in all due respect, we're going to have her speak,
Okay,
and then she can address the issues that are before the board this evening,
okay.
and then you would be able to speak afterwards.
All right, well, due to her disabilities, I do have to read the paperwork and read it to her and give her the understanding. And as a mental health advocate and a family advocate to reunify this family, to help care for the farm, you do need to give me the chance and opportunity to do that with her
Like I
so
said,
she can respond.
yeah, like I said, she would be primary, and you could certainly speak
That's
afterwards, okay?
That's fine,
So, we've already started this hearing,
okay?
because it was started at 6 o'clock.
We do
All right.
apologize.
And for Miss Olivera's benefit, there's been some discussion, and I'm gonna have the chairman just quickly recap the discussion that we've had, okay? And I could, if you'd like me, I'd go ahead if.
Yeah, go ahead.
We discussed this evening, and we've entered into the record, the fact that there was a letter drafted on 8/23 by the Director of Health, and that letter was transmitted by the Tewksbury Police Department over to the Olivera Farm address, that Dennis's caretaker signed for a copy of the letter, that the actual letter and the copy of the service was entered into the record this evening, so that you're here properly because of that notice. And that's what was discussed this evening. Then what was discussed was the fact that there was ducks unpermitted on the property. And the number was determined,
Approximately 2 dozen, around.
approximately 24 ducks, okay? They were determined to be loose and about the premises and actually near the barn area of the slaughterhouse, which caused a public health threat. And the public health threat was brought to the attention through the letter. Based on that letter, you, as one of the Oliveras, and you're here in that representative capacity, were asked to remove the ducts and come to the show cause hearing and to bring an operation manual at the same time. That was the purpose of the meetings tonight. We've already brought up the fact that the ducts are still there, and the ACO has given testimony that the ducts are still on the premises, but segregated
Yes.
or penned in a different spot, but have not been removed. And that's where we're going to pick up with you, because tonight's process is about the ducts, the contamination, their new future home, and their removal, so that we can say that there's no immediate public health threat. So, I'm gonna bring it back to the chairman, and he's going to conduct the meeting. And if you'd like to go through the chair, you'll be able to respond to any questions or concerns that we brought up this evening. First being, the removal of the ducts has not been complied with. The second thing is, the removal of the ducts has not been complied with, and something contrary has occurred. They've been put in a pen rather than complying with the order. So with that, Mr. Chairman, do you have any questions for the representative of the Olivera family this evening?
I guess two questions I have. One is if you can explain why the ducts were not moved as per the order. And second, then why would they move to a pen, something we had not included as part of the order?
So as far as
She can't even answer your questions. She's not there.
hello? Oh, there.
Yep.
Um,
Just hold up to your mouth. There you go.
So my father has always had ducks. That's ever since the beginning of time that he's been there. I understand that this has become an issue all of a sudden. And you're saying that it's not on the permit. But when he did the permitting with people, he did not understand that ducks weren't to be on the premises. Did I lose my mic? No, there we go. And so he's always gone and had ducks. And we've never had a problem in the past. So as far as my knowledge is, the ducks that were loose were collected and housed.
So, Mr. Chairman, can I follow up with that?
Go right ahead.
You have personal knowledge that there's a permit for the keeping of animals issued by the town of Tewksbury, correct?
I understand.
Do you have a copy of that? Because if you don't, I'm gonna
Not
give
with me
you,
at this time.
I'm gonna give you a copy.
It's in the packet.
Is it in the
I think
package?
the microphone is actually dying, that's why I keep shutting off.
Do you want this one?
Yeah, I think you can.
Thank you.
What would you like for us to see?
Well, first, I just wanna have her familiarize herself with the keeping of animals permit that's in the package.
All right, animal permit?
Yes, and if you look at the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see the animal.
Give me a few minutes, I can-
Sure, thank you, yeah,
Thanks.
yep.
Yeah, yes, allow me to read. I hereby granted a permit to keep animals in the town of Tewksbury, as granted by the Tewksbury Borough of County Public Hearing. This permit is granted in accordance with the GTA statutes of ordinance relating thereto and expires on April 30th, 2021, as soon as suspension of the law. This permit shall be posted in conspicuous place fairly too close up to frame with the contents of the permits is strictly prohibited. This permit is not transparent. Jen, what would you want us to read to the auto?
No, I definitely want you to familiarize yourself with the bottom left of the permit. because that describes the animals that are permitted.
This is what I think it wants. 35 pigs. 3 or 4 cattle.
And Mr. Rue?
Yes.
Question for you, because you and I were both on the board at the time of those hearings. I believe that Mr. Olivera was present with his attorney at those meetings.
That's true.
Okay.
So,
So are you,
Eileen was there too.
yeah, but the last part of the meetings I wasn't, I had a preemie.
Well, that's
Pretty
no-
big now, so I wasn't familiar with the meetings.
I was actually the last.
okay, so you're familiar with the bottom left hand on the numbers of animals and the types of animals?
So
There's no ducks in it, that's what it's trying to tell
I
you.
understand what he's saying, and
Because you all didn't put down the ducks.
so
Well,
this was my argument with people before me, so I'm not trying to dispute the permit, but I am at the same time, because my father cannot read and write, even though he had an attorney. He did not understand that he had to have ducks on there when he signed the paperwork. If my father could have read his ducks weren't on there and knew that, he probably would have been like, hey, I need my ducks on there. So that, because if you look in previous permits, I'm sure somewhere there were ducks on the permits.
there's never been any ducks on the permit, and the permit that's in front of you is the current permit.
Yep.
So we understand that there may be some confusion at the Olivera household, but the fact is that there's no ducks on the permit. So those animals are not permitted. That's the reason that we're here this evening. We're not here to discuss whether or not someone misunderstood the permit, because as part of being a permit holder, you're obligated to understand the nature of the permit, okay? That's not something that we're here to discuss. We're only here to discuss the fact that the ducks aren't on the permit. We have an emergency situation where the ducks were loose. We ordered you to come in and show cause why we shouldn't take further action by removing the ducks. The ducks weren't removed, the ducks were replaced in a pen. So right now, what we have before us is a difficult choice, because you haven't taken, or someone from Olivera Farm hasn't taken, the specific action requested, and the reason that we're here this evening. As a board, what we do is we make findings of fact and determinations as to whether or not the order was complied with. If the order wasn't complied with, then we have remedies as the board, because the permit holder is subject to these remedies. One of our remedies is to immediately have the ducks removed. So, what we think is the best course of action, since you got here late, since you didn't understand the permit, the best course of action would be allow you to 10 o'clock tomorrow morning to remove the ducks, bring them up to the MSPCA, or bring them somewhere that they're safe, okay? Because here's your options. Your options are to come back to the Board of Health, make an application for the ducks, make an application for the ducks, and reapply to see if the ducks could go back to the farm. But you also have other obligations tonight. The other obligation is to have an operations document about the slaughterhouse, okay? Because this involved the slaughterhouse and the cross-contamination with the barn. That's the public health threat. We're removing the public health threat. Hopefully you're doing that before 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, okay? If it isn't done by 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, we have to refer it to the ACO. The ACO would then take charge of the animals. And the ACO would then make reservations for them to be kept so that you can make reapplication here. Just so it's clear, we're removing a threat. We're removing the animals. We're not taking your animals from you. Number two, not completed. We asked for an operations document that relates to the slaughterhouse. Because in October of 2019, You were represented, your family was represented by counsel. Dennis was represented by counsel. He was also represented by an expert. That expert worked on a plan and an operations plan. That's a draft. That's a draft plan. That's a draft plan. It's never been formalized. We're looking for a formalized plan. That means that you have to get a representative to assist you, whether that's a lawyer or that expert. That expert has to represent the permit holder. Who do we know the permit holder to be? Dennis. Can't represent you, can't represent his daughter, needs to represent Denise because he can't be here. We want to make sure that he has the proper representation as well as the proper advisors in order to come back here and show compliance with our orders, because that's what this meeting is all about, compliance. And we want to make sure that the public health is protected so that safely removing these ducts, if you do it, is fine. You have to do it by 10 o'clock though.
Can, excuse me.
Hold on. I grabbed those damn ducks all night. I put the situation.
So hold on.
Hold on.
So hold on, before you get to speak, the rest of the board gets to speak and chime in on this thing. And then we have some specific things that we have to do. Then we'll allow you to discuss that, and then we're gonna take a vote, okay? So, right now, we're gonna turn this over to the chairman, and the chairman's gonna poll the board and find out if there's anything else to discuss that I may have left out. Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we'll take the first item first, the compliance with the move of unpermitted animals. Do any board members have any questions for Ms. Olivera tonight about the non-compliance?
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
I can vouch for the fact that Dennis has had ducks there since the beginning of time. I've been there and I've seen his ducks for years, so I don't know why they're not on here. I thought that when we transitioned what that farm was into a custom slaughterhouse, these things were all considered. I didn't know that he still had ducks roaming around there, but he has had them since I've known him. He's always had ducks there. He could have a yak there. He's had everything there. I've seen them.
The only thing that we have, and I'll just address this quickly, the only thing that we have is precedence does not take over the terms of this permit.
Great.
The fact that there was ducks there before doesn't grandfather them under this permit. What addresses this permit is a reapplication of permitting of ducks through the health director and through the proper channels. We don't have the ability to waive in the ducks, even though Mr. Rue has personal knowledge and familiarity with the farm and its operations. The problem was the ducks were loose. The ducks were afoot.
The problem I had with it is they formalized a custom slaughterhouse. And with that, there were certain considerations and laws that you had to follow, and ducks weren't part of it. So we confined it to what you're gonna do and how you're gonna do it, and ducks weren't part of it. And I haven't been on the farm proper for a long time, but I'm going back 45 years, you know. I've known Dennis for a long time.
But I just wanted you to understand, just the fact that you had ducks before doesn't change our situation. The only thing that would change our situation is a proper application
So
from Dennis.
I'm not arguing that fact right now. I just want, so can we have a little later than 10 o'clock? Can we like have up till like 5:30 tomorrow, if that's possible to?
Well, let me do this. Since the ACO would be the one that we would have to turn to, why don't we find out from the ACO what the schedule would be like in order to get the ducks removed from here to Methuen?
So that's a little bit of an, thank you. That timeframe, absolutely, I think would be fine. You know, however, in the past, we've asked them to meet a deadline with other things that they have not. So I'd love to give you that, Eileen, to be able to get that if it's going to happen. The thing about the ducks is, because they are at a slaughter facility, they are not gonna be able to go to the MSPCA. These animals are gonna have to strictly go through the slaughter chain. And the slaughter chains only operate on certain days, like there's one place opens up on every Tuesday, one every Monday. So if the plan is for the ducks to go back to the slaughter chain, which is where they should go, because they've had so much commingling in the slaughter barn without any type of veterinary care, it would be my recommendation that they go through a slaughter chain.
Okay, since the determination is that they may not be fit for keeping at a temporary facility like the MSPCA, the ACO is recommending that they go through the proper channels, and she knows best whether or not these ducks can be housed and where they actually have to end up. That doesn't change the fact that if you want ducks, you can reapply, Dennis can reapply for the keeping of ducks. As part of that operations manual that we were talking about here, condition 2, they would have a specific section about the ducks, about poultry, about anything else that is separate from the slaughter barn and the slaughterhouse. And we would hold you to those operation guidelines so that this will never happen again, that a public threat to health could happen because a duck might walk through something that ends up in the slaughter barn and therefore ends up in the slaughterhouse and may end up in someone's food. So from a standpoint of the removal of the ducks, if it changes your mind, they wouldn't be going to the MSPCA, they would be being handled by the ACO.
Well, excuse me.
No, go ahead.
It would
follow
be,
up,
it would
please.
be their responsibility to bring it to a slaughter chain. That there would need to be, I would suggest maybe figure out the date and time, if you're gonna bring it to Flame, you know, if it's gonna be this coming Tuesday, what time are you going, how are they getting there? If we can maybe get a count on them, and we would need a receipt back showing that those ducks did go to Flame or whatever other slaughter operation chain you would use.
That can be arranged.
I'm sorry,
That can be arranged to get
Okay.
them to the Flame.
to Flame?
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
glad you guys are talking because you know the situation there.
Right.
Christine.
Doesn't matter.
So
I
it
have-
plays me on it.
If I have to have someone go over and get that.
That's too much work for me.
So just so you know,
There's a situation.
as right now, due to some family issues, Eileen is not going on the property. So this is very difficult. There's been a lot of communication issues between her and her brother David, who have been very involved since Dennis has stepped away a little bit. So for her to say yes, that they're going to be removed, they're going to need equipment, like, you know, such as a trailer for these animals to be caught and brought to Flame, and that's not something I believe Eileen usually handles.
So-
Is that,
Can the ducks be picked up?
yes, they can be picked up. And you would need something to have to put them in, and then you have to have whoever it is that's going to drive there. And
If I have to get someone to go.
Can we tell you the truth what's going on?
this is publicized.
Who's running the
Maria,
farm?
So
just you know.
anyways, so if I have to hire someone to go over with a truck and pick them up, I will. Because this is not the first time I've had to jump over a hurdle right now. I just need to fix the problem.
I don't think the problem is going to be time, because we understand the logistics of getting this done. And even though there's an immediate threat to public health, we have people in place that appear to be able to comply. You appear to be indicating that you can comply and that you're gonna do what it takes to get the animals moved from the farm.
Yes.
So as it relates to your question about 10 o'clock, yes, we can afford more time to get this done because of the logistics.
Thank you.
The issue is that if it doesn't get done, there's going to be an immediate action to take the animals. It's going to cost. Someone's gonna come and pick them up. They're going to send you a bill. This isn't just done gratis by anybody. So coordinating this pickup or this trucking or this transfer, you're indicating that it can be done. You're indicating you're willing to do it, is that correct?
It's gonna get done.
Okay, so if it isn't done and we have a time limit, I'm gonna, again, defer to the ACO about time limits because operations happen from that direction, not us.
I would say Tuesday, if you can bring it to Flame, is that,
The most I can do is pack them up, talk to David, and if you allow us to transfer it on Tuesday to the Flame.
yeah, if that's,
We don't want no more issues with permits and
I got
licenses.
two questions.
If you allow us.
well, that's what we're talking, that it doesn't matter who does
I
it,
want something black and white saying that we're transporting them.
you don't need a 127 from the state,
What
Val.
issues-
That's something different on the transport. They're not quarantined, the ducks, okay? So they can, they don't need any paperwork signed to leave the property.
So we're gonna take account.
Yep.
Sell the ducks. They're gonna be off the property and then we'll reapply for a permit.
While that's happening, can we do that?
We're not gonna do all these things at once. We're gonna try to resolve the removal of the duck issue, because that's why we're here this evening.
So that's the first.
Okay.
Mr.
So-
Chairman,
Yes.
So, yeah, you can turn it over to the chair and he can hold.
I just have a quick question.
Go ahead.
Who's running the operation down there? Is it David
So.
or is it
David-
Eileen?
David and I were working together
Yep.
and,
You had a
really don't
problem.
want to go into a big discussion
No.
about it.
No, and we don't want you to.
Who is running the operation? Who should be sitting here talking to us? Because it sounds like we're kind of doing one of these flyovers
Well,
here.
it doesn't matter what's happening right now. I'm making sure they're not packed up and ready to leave
Okay,
Tuesday morning,
yeah,
I will find someone, I don't care who it is, they will bring it to the auction
Okay.
for me.
so that was one. The second one is because we've been through this, over this bridge before. Is there something that we can do to assure the board that this will in fact happen? Could we possibly revoke the permit for animals until such time that they're removed? Or why it sounds like, let's see if you can do it again, and it doesn't happen, and we're back here again. Is there anything we can do that's a little bit harder to say that, okay, you can't do this, you're not having any animals until you can do something right here?
Well, if I may,
Go ahead.
this isn't a penalty thing, so we're not looking for remedies under 8.1 where we have specific remedies under the keeping of animals.
Yeah.
What we're looking to do is get compliance. Now, your second question is, if we don't get compliance, what are our alternatives? Our alternatives are with the ACO, because the ACO is taking the ducks or having them ordered and removed, and that cost is gonna be borne by the Olivera Farm. Am I overreaching?
well, of course, this is a first, with taking of ducks from a slaughter chain. So I'm not sure how we would take them and bring them to a slaughter chain. That would be something I would have to look into. If they were a domestic, like say pets, absolutely, we could take them at, that point and bring them to a different facility, but they're not pets. So
But you have alternatives.
we could find something, I'm sure.
So
To
the
see.
alternatives are, the ACO makes a unilateral decision based on the circumstances to act upon removal of the ducks, okay? They'll go to one slaughterhouse or another slaughterhouse, but they'll go through the proper chain. And she has the discretion to do this. You have the duty to remove the ducts. If you fail, then it gets turned over to the alternative, and the alternative will be based on the circumstances at the time that the ducts have to be removed.
So I have a quick question. It was brought to my attention a few hours ago, there may be a duck or two loose, so I'm not sure.
I saw that,
So,
that there was one or two
That's the only
looses.
reason I know about it, so I just wanna make sure we're gonna try to catch whatever's loose and put it in with the other ones, but I don't wanna be totally scrutinized if it got away, and it comes back in a couple days and it shows up, and we're like, oh, cause it hid, cause they can run pretty fast.
Yeah.
So,
They can.
Well, I think we understand the fact that, it's a farm. There's complications. There's always something arising.
all right.
There's nothing that's
So as long
static.
as the majority has been removed, and God forbid there's a few stragglers somewhere, and we recollect them and do the same process with them until the permit is applied for, everybody will be happy with that decision.
Well, that's great. I'm glad you understand the process, and I'm gonna turn it back over to the chair to take any other considerations. I've said my piece.
So I have a question for you in terms of, assuming there were some stragglers who probably got wind of what's happening, and I wouldn't blame them for running. What steps should they take to ensure public, or the safety of the public health with the potential that ducks have escaped on the property?
Well, it would be any animal, chickens, roosters, anything that's running at large on the property should be put into some type of contained, humane holding. With the poultry and the ducks, even though, say for the chickens, they're not permitted to slaughter there, however they can have the chickens, so the chickens get sold. But in that meantime, those chickens should not be roaming just like the ducks within the slaughter barn and then going over to other animals like the horses and things like that. So there should be some type of constructed pen coop for them that is humane, because these animals don't get slaughtered there, so we don't know how long these chickens stay there. So you can't just keep them in like a dark room area with a couple of windows. They would need something that's more proper.
Okay, well, let me ask the question this way.
Excuse me one second.
Yeah. 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 Since I've never been to the property, and correct me if I'm wrong in the terminology, but there is a slaughter barn where the animals reside before they go into the slaughterhouse.
Correct. Any animal that comes from a slaughter chain, that is bought from a slaughter chain, goes into the slaughter barn, and that's where his customers come to pick out their animal prior to going into the slaughterhouse.
And so how do ducks get into the slaughter barn?
Because they're not contained, so there's many access ways for the ducks and chickens to just jump into the barn area.
Okay, so it's not feasible then to try to do something construction-wise to prevent unwanted
No,
animals
because
from
you
going
would
in?
need, you'd have to do a lot of like screening in or fencing like in for airflow, and I think it would be really difficult for that. I think their best way would be is to construct some type of duck coop pen, and it would obviously have to have a cover over it so they don't fly out. Same thing with the chickens, and then when they do have a customer coming in, that does want to purchase one of them, then they can just go into the coop, take one of them out. Your customer can even pick which one if, they can figure that out and just take it from there. And then the customer has, what they would like, they have their purchase, but they're confined to an area where they would not be walking into the slaughter barn where those animals being kept prior to their hours of slaughter, the 72-hour hold.
Okay,
I have
so,
another question, Ray.
yeah,
So this is a custom slaughterhouse and a retail chicken and duck. That's kind of, I'm confused. I
So
thought they, I
as
thought
far
the
as-
animals that came on the property were tagged for slaughter, custom slaughter on the property. I didn't know they were
That is correct.
wholesaling, retailing.
So the only
Chicken,
thing
ducks.
from the state, so they used to have a permit, I believe, for the chickens in the past, to have them, and, I mean, to slaughter them
Yes.
on the property.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure what it was, but the state came back at some point and said, you cannot slaughter them on the property anymore. I don't know the exact reason for it, I just know that this was quite a few years ago, maybe, it was before I started, so.
Oh, we remember the
I
reason.
remember they
Yeah.
got the plecker from the Tewksbury Farm. I helped Dennis bring it onto the property.
Okay,
The rubber finger plecker that we.
Still has it.
Yeah.
yeah, so.
But I didn't know,
for-
see, I didn't, so is this all part of what they're permitted to do over there?
So as far as I know, the state, when talking to the state, they can have the chickens,
For sale?
for, that someone can come and say, I want that chicken.
And they take them home and,
And they,
You
they take them home and they're
responsible.
they're
They slaughter them.
responsible for.
yeah, in the
for-
backyard or something?
Right, for doing that on their
Or they
own.
take them and get them cut up?
Yes,
Right.
but they're responsible. They take them live from the property. and
Yeah, I didn't know
it's
you
their
were doing that.
responsibility to
That's
care
all.
for it.
Yeah.
I thought they would, everything that came on the property was.
Right,
was-
and so I believe that's the same thing for the purpose of the ducks as well, it's just that there's no permit for that.
Yeah.
Okay, so coming full
So-
circle back to the duck. So the board has, tonight, we have at least one motion or one vote to take, and that is going to be on what the next step is, that we're gonna, as a board, require Olivera Farm to take with the ducks. So I think we've heard from the ACO that it's really because the ducks are in the slaughter chain now, that there is no putting them in a duck hotel until such time that they may have a permit to bring them back, but they do need to be slaughtered, so. And that would be on next Tuesday at Flame in Littleton.
What if they had a sale on ducks over the weekend,
Can we do
sold them
that?
all?
I mean, they can, sell as many ducks as they
So
want
if you,
for
so if
that
you
time.
sold all your ducks and they weren't on the property Tuesday, then we'd come back and they're gone.
You just need to have records of, purchase and absolutely.
So,
My understanding of Christine, because I'm the one at the farm. Eileen's not at the farm. I am the one at the farm, but not by choice. And they're the farmers. I'm just an advocate from Brooklyn and trying my best to help them out. So what you say to Eileen is basically what I have to do. And I've been working with Christine and David Oliveira, which been trying to redirect them. I'm trying to work with all the liabilities and the rules and regulations. I talked to Kevin, he told me, Val, you gotta be there more often, be more hands-on. I'm like, okay, show me. And I asked Christine, show me.
Well, I think you're
She
going,
acts-
you're going right into the second
Yeah.
part of our
Yeah, so just hold that
discussion,
discussion.
Tim, so hold that thought, because we're gonna get
Because it's
to
about
that.
the ducks, honey.
This is
Yeah.
about the ducks, and we're gonna talk about operations after the ducks. So right now, we're going to do what a board does, and we're gonna make some findings of fact based on everything that was said here this evening.
Yes, but
Everything-
I was not allowed to speak. I've been
Understand,
working with
everything
Christine.
that was said here this evening
And
is
she-
going to be considered as part of the record.
Okay,
And we're gonna now just make some findings of fact. So if the chairman allows me, I'm gonna go forward with those findings of fact. We're gonna make the findings of fact, then we're gonna put a formal order together that you two can follow, which will include the sale of the ducks and eventually the removal on Tuesday. So
I just wanted a record that we have tried to comply with Christine, everything that she's
it's going to
asked
be,
us.
it's gonna be in the findings,
We
okay?
So
Comply to
before I have
everything
you-
you asked us
Yep.
to do.
So, just so I'm clear, there are two options. Whatever ducks aren't sold for slaughtering off property, so owner is responsible for everything as long as it's an off property. And whatever ducks remain unsold that are still there, go to Flame on Tuesday.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, with that, I'm going to go over a set of findings, and we're going to see if the board will adopt that, add to it, or detract from it. Finding number one, there were ducks in the slaughter barn that resulted in an order to show cause, and that you're here addressing the order to show cause. Number two, the notice was delivered properly, and as a result of that proper delivery, there's a representative here from the Olivera Farm addressing the ducks. Three, we asked you to come to a hearing, you did show up to a hearing, and we've discussed the available remedies and resolutions to the removal of the ducks. Four, we issued a removal order in that notice, which we need to modify because it asked you to remove the ducks within 24 hours.
Yes.
We understand that the logistics of that makes it almost impossible. With that, we're altering that notice via the board this evening, okay, to include a date in the future, which is Tuesday.
Suzanne.
And the actual date is?
31st?
So you will effectuate removal by Tuesday, the 31st, by 5:30 PM. And we find that that's reasonable in light of the circumstances that you presented here this evening, okay? The last finding is that the logistics require a modification of the order, and that the ACO will be in charge of the ducks after 5:30 PM on the date after August 31st. Okay, you understand that? And during that interim, you would have the ability to sell or remove the ducks. Okay, so going back over those findings, do you understand everything that we discussed here this evening?
Yes.
Because we're gonna transcribe these so that you have a copy of these findings. And now we turn it over to the chairman to find out whether or not there's anything I missed or anyone wants to add.
I will add one thing, just some type of statement, because they believe that some of the ducks escaped, so that if any more ducks are encountered, that they need to go through the same process of offer for sale, or if not, then they need to make arrangements to have them slaughtered at flame.
So then we're gonna make a finding that of these 2 dozen ducks, that maybe 3 dozen ducks, that some of them may be escapees, and some of them may be about the farm, and that it's gonna be your obligation to corral them and get them and dispose of them in the same manner. Would that be reasonable?
That would be reasonable.
And dispose of them in the same manner?
Yep.
Okay?
Without a time frame, because they're gonna hide as long as they wanna hide.
Yeah,
I
they're
think
pretty,
the ACO will keep up on this, and I think we have a thumb on it,
I expect her to.
okay?
Visits almost every day.
So any other board members have any other items they'd like to add to the order? Or finding of facts?
Sell the decks.
So
Quickly as
now that
possible.
we've made these findings of fact, the board's going to determine and vote on it, that there's nothing else that needs to be added. And Mr. Chairman's gonna pull the board, okay?
So we're not talking about nothing else but the ducks.
We're gonna
Correct.
issue an order after this.
Yeah. So you're gonna put that, someone's gonna put that in a motion?
Okay, based on these findings of fact, I'm gonna make the following motion. That the order that was issued on 8/23 to remove the ducks in 24 hours is modified. It's modified and extended through August 31st at 5:30 PM. That if the ducks aren't sold, removed, or otherwise disposed of properly in your chain of liquidation, that the ACO is authorized to then take charge of the ducks and to properly have them committed to a slaughter facility, whether that's Littleton or somewhere else. And that 3, you will continue to honor this obligation to remove the ducks, even though there's a deadline on the 31st, because we have some ducks that are at large, and you're going to secure them and dispose of them in the same manner that we have discussed in this order. Anybody?
No, it's okay. Someone will second the motion.
I will second the motion.
So the motion's been put forth and second, and due to its length, I'm not gonna even attempt to restate it. But we'll take a vote. All those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
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 Chair votes aye, so motion carries 4-0. Okay,
With that, Mr. Chairman, you're gonna make a motion to close this portion of the proceedings this evening?
sure. So I'll make a motion to close the I guess,
Agenda item 1.
agenda item number 1, compliance with removal of unpermitted animals. All those in favor of closing it signify by saying aye.
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 Why
Chair
do we
votes
have to
aye as
be
well.
like this when you took my notes?
Now, the second portion of this evening, Mr. Chairman's gonna talk about the second item that's on the agenda this evening. And we wanna bring it to your attention because there's a representative of the Olivera Farm here. And this is about the operations.
Right, so the other agenda item tonight was provide a detailed management plan for the operations at the Olivera Farm, including but not limited to keeping of animals and the operation of the custom slaughterhouse. Back in fall of 2019, when you had retained Attorney Bornstein and retained a consultant, the consultant had prepared a draft operations and maintenance plan for operation of the custom slaughterhouse. And due to COVID-19 pandemic, work had paused on that, I think around April of 2020. I think it was the March meeting, the board did receive on the day of the meeting a draft of the operations plan. So we didn't have time to properly review it. It was still a work in progress. And the last communication we'd had with Attorney Bornstein last May was that given the COVID situation, work was going to be suspended in that and then would resume once the pandemic had subsided. So part of what we're looking for is not brand new, but it should be just completing the work that the consultant had already been doing, and hopefully retain that consultant again to have him finish the work. And he was also going to work in getting the staff trained in the slaughterhouse and then go back every so often and just ensure that people are following the experts' recommendations. We're also looking for a similar thing in the keeping of animals, because one of the things we'd asked for in the custom slaughterhouse, looking at the keeping of animals, is a roster. Who's there? Who's responsible for what? And then an org chart so we know who's actually running things. And I think the other challenge of this is that both we and the state still view Dennis Olivera as the owner and operator of the property and the one that is making all the decisions about what happens there. So if something has changed, we'll need to know that, and you'll need to notify the state as well, because both entities still are under the operating premise that Mr. Olivera himself is running things day to day.
Mr. Chairman, there really is no structure there. I believe that they could, state that there's been, no one really knows who's doing what, who's responsible for what. They haven't had any slaughters in a couple weeks, I believe, 2 or 3 weeks. I believe David, who had been picking up a lot of the job details of the slaughter chain and purchasing and selling, hasn't been there to our understanding. We have not been able to get a hold of him. He has not returned any of our phone calls, emails for weeks. And like I had stated before, that we have animals that have been sitting there for over 2 weeks now that should have been slaughtered within 72 hours, whose conditions are deteriorating. Because they're not, and those slaughter animals do not get fed proper diet because they're not supposed to be there that long. They're only being fed hay, as far as I know, hay and water. That's it.
Right, and our concern is that from a public health standpoint, we know that the holiday seasons will be fast approaching with a big demand for custom slaughter meat. So we're very concerned about the lack of an organized structure there to ensure that the health of the animals is being maintained so that it does not translate into public health emergencies such as what brought us here tonight.
Right.
And this is not we don't think anything negatively of it. We're just recognizing that there's been a lack of visibility of sort of who's running things. And our concern is that, to your point, Mr. Rue, it's not operating like it used to operate before.
So, when I was there every day, I was very, very involved. Like, hours and hours of my day was spent caring for property and animals. So, right now, I don't have full access to what I'd like to be doing to properly do everything, but I'm going to try to make sure things get followed through on.
Well, I think
At least
if I
possible.
may,
Go right
if I may answer you for a second. That's exactly why we asked for an operations plan, right? Because we know, just like the order that we just modified, we have the ability to work with you. We're not here to do anything other than to work with you and keep you in compliance with the regulations that you're under, which happen to be dual jurisdictions, actually 3 jurisdictions, federal, state, and local. That operations manual is going to keep you in compliance with federal, state, and local. Right now, you don't have that completed, right? Therefore, we can't expect you to step into the shoes of anyone because we haven't identified that. But let me just tell you about this operations plan. What does it entail? First of all, it entails a succession plan. Denise can't operate. Who is going to step into his shoes? That's what has to be determined. You as a family would have to determine that. How it's going to happen, there are all sorts of people out there that can assist you with this. Attorney Bornstein would be an excellent choice to assist you with the succession plan. But the succession plan is important because you need to have an authorized operator. Right now, that's Dennis, and he's not capable of doing that. So the first thing that you have to figure out is who is going to be part of that succession plan? And who is going to step into his shoes? Who is going to operate, whether it's family member or you have to hire outside? Because it would seem to me that if you're running a slaughterhouse, you would have the income to address a budget, and a budget would mean employment. So number one, succession, and that's something that you have to talk to your representative about. The other things would be your hours of operation, how the animals are going to be fed and who feeds them, how the animals are going to be watered, and how they're going to be taken care of in that 72-hour window that you have to do your custom slaughter. And you can't exceed the 72-hour window. I believe there's a fudge factor of
There
up
is a
to,
little bit, the federal does 5 days, I believe,
Okay.
106 hours or 100.
right, so you got just over 100
Just over,
hours. And
yeah.
there's a fudge factor between the DPH and the federal that allows you to get that slaughter done within that time period. But somebody has to assure that that happens. Otherwise, we have to step back in and say that the public health is being threatened. And then you end up back here. But an operations manual is going to address each one of these factors.
Can we have one of those manuals?
No, but we can give you an outline from the minutes here that we're discussing right now. The actual manual itself, you already have it. You had an expert. They created it.
That's Kevin, the one that told me to go in there, go out.
They created it. You need to pick it up and you need to dust it off and you need to put it back into operation. If you need to hire Kevin back or hire an expert back,
I've been working with Kevin.
Okay.
That's why I'm here.
all right, good enough. So let's take another step. Let's finish this up, okay? So not only would you have these feeding, watering, maintenance of the facility, It's all part of the operation manual. And then once you have this operation manual, everybody's on the same plane. You, your employees, your successors, the slaughter crew, the Board of Health, the ACO, the local, state, and federal all know where everything's going. Right now, that's not happening. And that's why all of this confusion, why all of this is being brought about, and now that's why you're appearing. So you can understand, when we asked for an operations manual, we knew you probably weren't bringing it, but we were hoping that you showed up so that we could have a discussion about you putting it in place, and the next thing we do is give you a time frame to do it, okay? Because you know what the alternative is? Suspension of activities at Olivera Farm for slaughter, because the public health is threatened. So with that, I'm gonna turn it back over to the chairman, and he's gonna wind this up.
And just so you can understand, back in 2019, in the fall, I shared the sentiment that we know that the Custom Slaughterhouse is serving a vital role in the local community. Our hope was that with the consultant and putting the guide together, that would be the roadmap to keep it successful, but also to ensure that it remained a source of healthy meat for those that were looking for it. So we were not looking, trying to shut things down. We were trying to give you folks the keys,
Operated safely.
yeah, to operate safely. And if it had to shut down, it would not be because of what we did, it's because it was not able to be followed through. So we were trying to give you every benefit of the doubt. And I think we're still looking at doing that tonight. So our opinion hasn't changed that as far as I'm concerned.
I believe you're right, now poll the rest of the board. Our role here is remediation, not penalties. We're here to make sure that you are successful, that things are moving along safely, and the public health isn't threatened. That's our job.
What about all of our pets?
Pardon me?
All of our
We're
pets.
not talking about that.
I'm not sure what that is.
Pets,
Pets.
Oh, the pets.
We're not
We're
discussing
not gonna
pets.
discuss the pets.
So,
We're just discussing the operation manual, because the next thing that we have to talk about is we're quickly going to make a finding of fact, and here it is. You don't have an operations manual in your possession that can be utilized in the operation of the Olivera slaughter operation. So what we're going to do is we're gonna make that finding of fact, then we're gonna put an order together that says that you will get this within a date certain. And we will be flexible with this, right? Because we understand that you have to go out and get somebody. So with that, I would first make the finding of fact that you don't have an operations manual that was required back in October of 2019, and that you're operating without one. With that finding of fact, can we make that as a board?
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, that where work had already been done in putting one together, absent having anything else to work on, and you come into busy season for slaughter, that's probably a good starting point to at least follow that and then keep adding on to it once the consultant is back on board.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
my recollection is they were this close to having an operations man.
yeah,
They were like.
there were
they had-
90%, there was the
They had
draft
it.
version.
And within that operations manual, is there identification of what person is running the show over there? Are there names associated with certain requirements or jobs?
I
within-
don't remember,
Because we've always, my question stands from the beginning of the meeting. Who's running?
the operations plan would address
It
that.
would address who and what their qualifications are to do it.
Who, what, when, where, and how? That's what it will
Right.
So
address.
who's
Yeah.
running it right now? Dennis is incapacitated still, right?
So, and here's the key part to that, because back then it was about the slaughterhouse part, and we had recommended that they identify a successor to Dennis that could be take over performing the slaughters from Dennis. And this is before all the
Yeah.
medical issues happened.
Yeah.
So I believe that someone had been named it. I don't have that report with me, so I'm not sure whom they had listed as a name. I don't know if they're still there, but we need to have that
Well,
who's
again-
who list, so we know.
Again, there's a way to humanely treat animals prior to slaughter, and there's a way to humanely slaughter them. And I'm wondering Who is it?
And that's what the,
Who it is.
right, and that's what the
That's what
manual.
we're trying to get them to do, is
Yeah.
identify this, and really, what it comes down to is that it's 90% complete. The rosters have to be completed. The operators have to be identified. The assistants have to be identified. The crew has to be identified. If you don't have these people, then your operation is shrinking, and your operation manual will address that deficiency. Do you follow me? We're not looking for you to be 100% operational, because if you only have 2 or 3 employees during COVID, you'll be operating at 30%. But that manual will show you how to do it safely at 30%. So answering Charles's question, Mr. Rue's question, is that it is a custom slaughterhouse. You will have a custom operation manual, and it will address all the deficiencies, and you will foresee the problems that may come about. And if you didn't have the crew to do this safely, you would suspend operations. That would be the last thing on the last page, suspension of operations based on the following. We don't have the crew. We don't have an operator. But that's up to you guys. We're just giving you the format. Follow it, address it, put it together. This way you can self-regulate yourself, watch out what's going on, and we too will also have knowledge of how it's supposed to be. So the next time that we sit down, we could open it up to page 13 and say, here's the problem, it's addressed in the operations and manual, why isn't it happening?
My concern is, until that operations manual gets done, I do have concern for many of the animals there. So what gets put in place short-term until that is done? You know, whether or not they come up with one person that's in charge of the animals, I don't know. But for us to go there on several occasions and find, you know, no food, no water, we've even had deceased animals found, and that is a big issue.
Okay, so there's 2 things.
You fed the animal?
Today, I actually gave animals
Water?
food and water.
See, that's not,
And we have had deceased animals found on the property.
So there's 2 things here I just want to address. She brings up an excellent point. But it's a bifurcation, meaning it's 2. It's not just 1. You have animals and the keeping of animals that require care.
Right.
You should have an operations manual for that section of the farm. It just doesn't mean slaughterhouse. You have multiple operations going there, which means you need to address multiple concerns. If there are animals there under your keeping of animals permit, and they're not being cared for properly, and someone has to come in and make sure that they have feed and water, then the keeping of animals permit can be revoked, rescinded, or suspended, which suspends all operations there. Okay, you won't be able to operate the slaughterhouse if your keeping of animals permit is modified. Secondly, the slaughter operations is something entirely different. That's what I mean by bifurcation. That's the second component. Both of those components have to be addressed, as the ACO just addressed. We can't have someone going on to that property and finding neglect of animals, because that affects your keeping of animals permit. And we would have to take action on the permit. Your operations manual won't help. Please, dust it off. We're going to now consider a couple of other things in case someone goes onto the property and finds neglect or finds that someone's not there operating. What kind of order are we going to put in place to protect the animals and protect the health? So I would open that up for discussion, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we need to discuss is sort of the schedule for this, knowing that the busy slaughter schedule is season's coming up, and we need to make sure that we don't have months for this to be finished, but the plan is almost complete. I think it really needs to be, I'm looking at, we need to have a short time frame in this to at least get things going to ensure the safety there, or the public health.
I agree, time is of the essence, and as the ACO has just indicated, there's a threat to animals not getting watered or fed, and that may be related to the ability of the farm to keep and pay help. It may be related to family considerations. They're gonna have to be resolved, whether they're family situations, and that's when family comes together. There's a problem, it needs to be addressed by the family comes together, right? Or it has to be outsourced, and someone else has to take that responsibility. But those are your choices on the keeping of animals. The slaughter thing is an entirely different situation. You have an operations manual, you have a facility to keep clean, you have a facility to keep up to state and federal standards. And we have to notify Mr. Moore of DPH of what actions we're taking here tonight. Because he has jurisdiction over your slaughter situation, and we have jurisdiction over the keeping of animals. So you see, you have a bifurcated issue that needs to be addressed. And I'm imploring you that even though families break down, families have to come together, or family businesses go some other direction. And I think that's the point you're at. But we have time to work it, not a lot of time. And as Mr. Chairman was just saying, it has to be a short lease and a short leash. That's no pun. And you have to address the finalization of that operations plan. And it should include the keeping of animals and the slaughterhouse as two separate obligations. Mr. Root?
In the meantime, we need a way to enforce what we're talking about here in terms of whether Pam goes on the property or Christine, whoever goes on that property, if they find an issue, we've got to put enforcement in place. We got to, something's
We've been dealing with this since the end of June,
a long time.
a long time.
Yes.
And we have given them many notice of violations of what they needed to fix. Not much of that was fixed.
Right.
Okay, and if it was, it took much longer than what the time frame was given. It's very overwhelming over there for the ladies. They're
Yep.
kind of on their own over there, and I get that. But someone needs to speak for these animals.
Yes.
And, that I'm very, very concerned. Like, we can't be going there every day and babysitting. We can't, if we don't go one week and, we go the following week and then we see an animal that maybe came in 2 weeks prior that we hadn't seen and it's in terrible condition, it's like, where do you draw the line?
Right. And if the state is not to be found half the time, we need a way to.
And the state is looking upon us about the keeping of animals permit. That's what they're looking at, stating that the town holds that permit.
So if that was suspended for a period of time, it would get somebody's attention very quickly, correct? Because the animals would be.
I think it would give them a time to be able to fix what's needed to be fixed, put the permits in place, find who is in charge of everything. You go down there, you can't find anybody a lot of times.
No.
We call David, we can't get a hold of him. It's,
What I'm saying, but you don't wanna, I'm alluding to, if you or Pam go on that property and there's something going on with it, and again, there's a humane way of treating an animal prior to slaughter and a humane way of slaughtering the animal.
correct,
We're talking about, we're flying over one another here with the state,
right.
and there's issues there. And I understand, I understand what's going on, but we need to get somebody's attention there quickly because the animals are suffering.
So,
And it's
right.
not the right thing to do, and I know that, and you know that. I know you know that.
so if I could,
Hold on.
Yes.
What I'm proposing here is that if we catch another incident down there, or if Christine or Pam finds another incident down there, that we do something immediately with either suspending that permit for a period of time or stopping all operations there. We don't have jurisdiction over the slaughterhouse, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so, but we do have jurisdictions over the animals on that property.
Right. I mean, we did, back in 2014, we did issue that local permit for the operation of the custom slaughterhouse,
Right.
which is a formality, but it might help get the attention of DPH if we were to
Why?
suspend. It would not prevent them from operating, but at least it would make DPH sort of look at,
The-
we better look at this, because if they,
To have her go on the property and be feeding and watering animals is nuts.
I
And
don't,
you just happen to be there.
Well, that's what I'm saying, and there's been multiple times where we've gone and some animals have had water, some haven't had. You know, with the ducks, just for, ducks need water to,
The ducks, you told us that to put them on, and you told us to put a pool, and then we did everything that you asked us, Christine. No, because you're not there. We have tried. We have tried, and I do have to speak, and if we have to all over for it, because I'm there.
We understand that you wanna speak.
But
We
this is not the
understand that you wanna
time.
Speak, but
Okay.
here's the thing.
So we've been trying to comply with everything you have asked, Christine.
Right.
Now this duck situation,
excuse me, this is,
Duck situation is
Yeah.
over.
yeah,
right? And I don't know if it's because of the situation with the goats are gone or our
We're not
pet
talking
situation,
about goats.
and you're
we're not
trying to
talking
hurt
about
them,
ducks. Ma'am,
but it needs to stop.
ma'am, yield.
We've been trying
You
to
have to
comply with
yield.
everything.
You have to yield, I'm sorry. We're not talking about goats, we're not talking about ducks.
So-
We're no longer criticizing your operation. What we're telling you is that we have a duty to make sure that your keeping of animals comports with good husbandry.
So prior to
So
the,
let me complete talking, because we're not gonna have a dialogue. It's late, we've been here, we've given you the consideration, now we're gonna have consideration of the board here. The consideration is, what are we going to do when someone comes across an animal that's being neglected? Period.
but
We need to have a remedy.
I feel that we've already come across too many times, and
Okay.
we've given them many chances. We've been very kind and tried to work with them, like, for a long time. We understand that this is their bread and butter, that this is their family business, but the business isn't what it was. And to say, okay, next time, so if we find another deceased animal, why is that fair?
It's not fair, and I agree
Right.
with you, I agree with you. We're here to come up with a resolution. We know that these things can happen. We know that's an eventuality. We know animals being neglected could be an eventuality. But all we can do as a health board is make an order so that everything is safe. And that's what we're doing here tonight. That's what this operation manual is about. It's about safety.
We issue the permit, we're responsible for the health and safety of those animals, and I don't want my name on that permit anymore. The way it stands right now, I don't want my name on it.
So let's.
I've heard enough
Mr.
coming.
Feely,
I've heard
what
enough
would
coming.
you recommend for us as due process for us to proceed? Because it sounds like there's talk of, there have been enough instances where things have happened and we can't really wait for the next one. I know we've talked about suspension of the permit, and one hand, your discussion about it's easy to fix a problem if you don't have the ongoing operations, because then you can sort of take a breather, restart once you have how it should be going, and then you can start things back up as appropriate. Again, I'm concerned that we're coming into the busy slaughter season. If things aren't being done correctly now and there are health concerns, I'm afraid that's going to be magnified if operations really ramp up and there is no process in place. So I'm sort of looking to you for guidance about what would you recommend is the best step for us to take?
So, Mr. Chairman, just to start off with this, I would not recommend having a vote tonight to suspend the permit because that's not on the agenda.
Correct.
So from a due process standpoint, there would be issues with that. So if the board wanted to consider a suspension of the permit that the board has issued, which it certainly has the right to do, then providing Oliveira Farm with written notice outlining the reasons that the board would be considering the suspension of the permit, and scheduling, a time to be heard. In addition, essentially, a lot has been heard tonight, but as part of a hearing on a suspension of the permit, that would be the appropriate mechanism.
Okay, so like, if we were to take that path, to have, schedule a hearing in a week or two would be proper time for them to,
Certainly, I mean, under the circumstances, if the board was to decide to do it in next week, that would certainly be appropriate based on what we've heard from the ACO.
well, I think we need to look at a time frame like that.
I think my
I
sister
wanna-
has been waiting to speak here, so
I
let's
can't,
let's
I've
yield
been
the floor.
listening to all of this, and I'm sorry, just from what I have heard, has been far too many instances of problems with the keeping of these animals. Yes, I'm sorry, I know you say that we should wait, I think that the permit should be suspended immediately until the family can get this operations manual completed, and I don't think anything should be happening on this farm right now until, if you're not even providing these animals with food and water, there's a much bigger problem. It's not consistent. I realize you're trying to do it, you're trying to do everything over there, but you're one person, and it sounds
So,
like there's other
as of-
issues.
So as of the end of June, I have not been able to do my usual things there because I haven't had full access to the property. But if that was fixed, then things would be smoothing out rather quickly.
My concern is what, if we say wait a week or 2 weeks to do, what happens to these animals in the meantime? That,
Hold on. We have slaughtering animals and we have pet animals.
I don't care about the,
The
like,
pet
all the
animals are
animals.
taken care
All of
of.
the animals
So,
should be cared for properly, whether they're going to be
Those are
slaughtered
the
or they're
animals I
going to
fed
be
today,
pets.
Val. The horses had no water today, they had absolutely no hay, I have photos.
So let me go back for a second, because Attorney Feely has basically stated what due process is before a permit could be suspended. But I wanna just mention to you that if you have a personal family problem on getting on that farm, you can go to the probate court, you can seek an order, you can make it happen, you can put a team together, you can resolve the family problem. If you choose not to do that, if you choose not to take advantage of the relief that's available for you through the court system in Massachusetts to address this family problem that's directly affecting animals, then that burden rests with you, okay? The second thing is, the Board of Health has the ability to put your operation in receivership, meaning we can get somebody to come and do this. They will take over your farm. You will not have the ability to operate it. Those are binary choices for you. The choice is that I understand you may have had some breakdown in the family relationship, but there are options. You need to seek counsel. You need to find out what those options are, because you're not gonna have a lot of time with this board, as you can hear, to address those things. Number one, you should seek competent counsel to address access to the farm and access to protect those animals. If you don't, due process will take its course, there'll be a notice, there'll be a hearing, there'll be an action about suspension. And I'm trying to make this as plain and clear to you as possible. I can't give you legal advice. I can tell you what your options are though, and you need to take advantage of those options to save your farm and to protect your operation. Seek counsel. You had excellent counsel the last time you were here. Attorney Bornstein was excellent. And maybe it's time to reach out and find out what your options are, because he came up with a great plan the last time. I don't think he would be remiss in taking you back on and coming up with another plan, but the time is short. As you can see, ACO is concerned, director's concerned, the board is concerned, and they're rightfully concerned. So, with that, I'm gonna make a finding tonight that you don't have an operation manual. and that it's not complete, and that it has reached a point of completion where you could hire someone and get it complete, and take care of the slaughter operation, and the keeping of animals operation. They need to be addressed. We need to know what they are. What's the board's pleasure on the time limit or frame for them to get counsel and come back in with some sort of completed document? That's the first step. The second step will be what happens if there's another report about neglect of animals. How does everyone feel on the first one, Mr. Chairman?
Well, I'm sorry, because I want to have as short a time frame as possible, but it's unrealistic to expect that all that can be accomplished within a week's time.
Unrealistic.
So I would say 2 weeks is more realistic, so looking at coming back here on September 9th. But to your other point, I don't know what options we have for remedies for if any more reports of coming in from the animal control officers or anyone that goes out there of anything that's continuing that has been a stated issue. I don't know what remedy we have in the interim. We need to have
Mr. Chairman,
The interim would be to notice a suspension of the permit properly, as Attorney Feely indicated, and to combine that with the September 9th meeting.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
in response to Mr. Scarano's comment, and through you to Attorney Feely, a permit is issued contingent on activities occurring relative to that permit, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely,
So
yes.
we don't need to take a vote here on whether or not we suspend a permit. You can suspend the permit tomorrow. Is that not true? It's a permit. And it's contingent on criteria that's being neglected right now. We don't
We're
need to
not
take a
ready-
vote.
we're not ready to
No, but
make
we're
those
not-
findings.
I'm not gonna vote on anything.
No, I know, but we're not ready to make those findings yet.
They've been found.
No,
The ACO has found them several times.
we're not here for the suspension of a permit though. We're here to talk about issue 1, which has been resolved, issue 2, which is an operations and maintenance manual. That's what we're here for this evening. And I understand that you have a stake in animal protection. I do, and so doesn't everyone here. But we're gonna just play it by the rules.
What I was asking Attorney Feely was that, do we have to wait to take a vote on it and then have a hearing on it? And there's animal suffering as we speak. That's not, I don't think that's, unless I misunderstood you, I thought that's what you were alluding to, and I'm saying I think a permit is contingent on certain things occurring. And
Can I just, have any of you been able to read any of the reports that were submitted through the police department?
no, we've not.
Okay, I think that before you even make a decision on saying no to not vacating that, I think it's something that you should.
I agree, and that's why we have right up until September 9th, because if we find animal neglect from the time this hearing ends until September 9th, we're gonna notice a suspension of the permit for September 9th. You'll have an ability to go get a lawyer and come in and talk about that stuff. But in the meantime, you're gonna have up until September 9th to put this operations and maintenance manual together. That's very fair. And what are we gonna do about animals that are in neglect? We'll have an emergency hearing if necessary. We'll advance,
I've reviewed those
we'll advance
reports.
it.
And I don't.
It was I'm sorry, I had thought
jurisdiction-
that you guys had them.
The jurisdiction for that permit is right there, not, we signed a permit allowing it. The jurisdiction for allowing that permit to continue is right there, In my opinion, the permit was issued on contingencies on how to treat, and there's been problems, there's a lot of problems, and they're ongoing.
Right.
That's where, it sits right there, doesn't it? We don't have to meet.
And again, and
And
I don't think it's an intentional thing, but it's
Nothing is-
happening
yeah.
because there's
Due to the
There's-
situation.
Due to the situation.
Yes.
Right, but
But the way to
again,
get, to get the retention,
as-
you'll.
right, like I really wish I didn't realize that you guys hadn't read any of those reports.
I have, which is why I'm a little bit on my edge here, that's.
Yeah, no, and our challenge is that I'm owner of pets, I love animals, and there's a conflict because we as a board have to follow regulations and follow due process, even though our blood pressure is going through the roof because of this. And we have to make sure that we do things legally, so if we don't take a misstep,
And that's what
they
I'm
don't come back
questioning,
at us and
is the
then
legality of.
it undoes what we do.
Who suspends what? It's like, we have a permit that we've agreed to here, and we've voted on
So
it.
here's my question to Attorney Feely, because I posed this question to Director Sullivan. As long as I've been on the board, we have never had to suspend a permit. Food establishment permits, things like that, that don't require a board vote, the director has the administrative ability to do.
Yes,
We've
We have
never
food
been in a
inspectors.
situation where there's a
Yeah.
board-approved permit, and does the director have administrative approval to suspend it like a food?
all
Establishment
food,
permit
all food
suspension.
permits are voted, we vote on them, and we have food inspectors, and we have Shannon.
No,
And now we have a permit that, for
When
the
we
keeping
had
of animals, we have a animal control officer, and we have Shannon.
No, what I'm saying is that when we had the last restaurant that Director Sullivan had to suspend their operations
Oh,
of,
yeah. Oh,
she did it as an emergency suspension and gave them the ability to
Yes.
come before us within, I think, 7 to 10 days.
Yes.
So I guess from a due process standpoint, we can say that that meeting on the 9th is gonna be, looking at, I guess, a show cause hearing for suspension of the permit, but if something happens between now and then, legally, does the director have the ability to suspend, knowing that we'll be having a hearing coming up anyway?
The director has the authority to suspend only if she finds an immediate threat to the public health.
Okay.
As a general rule, the board that grants a permit is the board that has the authority to suspend or revoke the permit.
Okay.
okay.
And just so, because I know that this has been an area also, just so we don't feel powerless, the animal control officer operates under a separate set of statutes and regulations that she may have authority to deal with situations if she feels that neglect or cruelty is involved.
Which is why I think it's.
That is
better
not part of what this board does.
That ACOs handle this rather than
I got
Pam,
it.
because ACOs have more,
Okay, I get it.
or they can handle.
But lastly, I think the issue here is that from a standpoint of suspension, I think everyone has an opportunity to be heard is at the minimum requirement. And noticing for a September 9th meeting, for a show cause, at that time, would give them proper notice and the ability to get counsel or an advocate that can represent them properly, and I mean an advocate that can bind them to address this thing,
The whole family, combine the whole family.
that can bind the family. And I mentioned before that if there's issues, then you need to take affirmative action because
Give me some time. Please give me, I've been trying to see me now. Council help me, I've been trying to get them to all get along.
So back to where we were, because this meeting has now gone 2 hours, we made a finding that issue 2, agenda item 2, that the Olivera Farm doesn't have a completed operations manual, that it's somewhere between 70 and 80 or 90% complete, and that we're asking by September 9th that you bring in a completed operations manual, that you secure the services necessary to complete it,
We'll reach out to Kevin.
okay? And 2, we're also gonna notice a show cause hearing why the permit shouldn't be suspended because of animal neglect and failure to keep the animals properly nourished during the time period between today's date and September 9th.
And all I'd add to that is that we would want the report at least a day ahead of time, so we have proper time to review it. The meeting is not the time, or right before the meeting does not give us time to properly review.
So I would say, 48 hours is
Yeah.
the minimum.
What?
48 hours is the minimum to submit your operations
Today?
manual.
No. September
before
7th.
Before September 9th.
Yeah, so September 7th, we'd want to have the plan submitted to the director so she could transmit it to the board members for review.
And I just want to remind you that we're the jurisdiction for the permit. The ACO has jurisdiction if she finds a violation. The state has jurisdiction if they find a violation. Remember, there are multiple people that are looking at this and multiple people that can act.
You need to listen to this, it's very important. You can't hear
But I
noise.
just found out the meeting's been going for 2 hours.
Okay, so
12 o'clock.
we have
I apologize for interrupting.
put the,
So the finding of fact that the operations manual is not complete, and the motion will be to continue both matters until September 9th. The operations manual will be delivered by September 7th in a completed form, addressing all of the shortcomings that were brought to the attention of the Olivera Farm this evening, including the succession plan, feeding plan, and all of those things we talked about, the operation of the slaughterhouse and the operation of the keeping of animals. Okay? So the motion is to bring the operations manual in a complete fashion September 7th for review and discussion on September 9th. And the motion is also includes the director's notice to the Olivera Farm of a suspension of the keeping of animals permit that will be also heard for September 9th. And I suggest that you do contact counsel or whoever is going to represent you so you can be appropriately represented. But all the facts will be considered again on September 9th as to whether or not the keeping of animal permit will be suspended.
okay, anyone willing to second that motion?
I'll second that motion.
Motion's been put forth and second, and we'll take a vote. All those in favor signify by stating aye.
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 Chair votes aye as well, motion carries 4-0. Okay. Okay. Guess we can,
Nothing else on the agenda.
no, so you can make your motion, Mr. Root.
I'd like to make a motion that we close tonight's meeting.
Okay, someone like to second the motion?
Second the motion?
Okay, motion's been put forth and second to adjourn tonight's meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well. It is 7:59. Good night, Tewksbury.